Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Capturing an image such as this in the wild is possible, but quite difficult. This picture was made entirely on a tabletop. A small flash and some cardboard was used for lighting. And in this video I'll show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so to start with the subject. These are sloe berries on a blackthorn bush. And what I've done is pruned a few twigs off so that I can bring them in here and photograph them. But using them just like this is quite difficult. So they need to be mounted somehow. There we are. So what I've done is I've placed this twig in this clamp. Now this is a lab stand or retort stand, and they're very useful for doing this sort of thing. You can orientate your subject very accurately with this. Okay, so we'll just place this on the table. There we go, and that's the beginnings of our subject. So the next thing to do would be to set a camera position. Now as I want to make a fairly close image around here somewhere on the subject, I'm going to use a tripod and I'm going to place it very close to the table. There we are, something like that should do. So for the camera, what I'm going to do is use a macro lens which will allow me to focus this close and give me quite a good level of magnification. Okay, so for the camera and lens, what I'm using is a medium format camera with a 120mm macro lens on the front of it. So in full frame format terms, that's something like the equivalent of a field of view you would get with a 70mm macro lens. Okay, so I'm just going to place this on the top of the tripod, like so. Now the camera I'm using is tethered into Capture One software, so it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. Okay, so let's just turn the camera on. There we are, and the software has recognized the camera, and I can see all the settings that I have on the camera in the software here. So it's in full manual mode. At the moment I've got a shutter speed of a 30th of a second, ISO 100, and the aperture is set to the maximum for this lens, which is f4. That will probably change. But just with those settings, what I'm going to do is focus up the camera and then we'll just take a test image just using the house lights. So just looking down the waist level finder, what I'm going to do is just focus the lens to about there. Okay, so that's just a rough focus point. It may well change, but it's a starting point. So with those settings, what I'll do, just grab an image just with the house lights and see what we get. And as you can see, we're getting something. It's very underexposed. So for a proper test, what I think I'll do is just increase the shutter time to, what, 1/4 of a second? Let's try that. There we are. So as a test image, that's not bad at all. It's showing that we're in the right area on the subject. So the next thing I want to do is actually set some proper lighting, if you like, a flash. And what I'm going to do is place a flash directly above, something like this. There we are. So this is a small flash head. This is about 250 joules. You don't really need a great deal of energy for this, so a small flash gun or speedlight will easily suffice. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I use the flash is reset those settings so that I cut out all of this light which I've used to take the test image. So the only light which will then affect the subject will be coming from the flash. So first thing I'll do is just set the shutter speed to the flash sync speed for this camera, which is 1/125th of a second. And then the next thing I'll do is adjust the aperture to give me a bit more depth of field. So I think I'll start with something like a modest f11, and with these settings and no flash turned on yet, I'm hoping for a completely dark image. Yes, and there we go. We've cut out all of that available light. So now it's safe to proceed with the flash. So I can turn the flash on. There we are. And just at an arbitrary energy level, I'll grab an image and we'll see what we get. Okay, and you can see from that we're getting something. It has a nice quality of light to it, I think, but it is a bit underexposed. So next thing to do would be just to add maybe one stop of energy to that flash. So let's just do that. There we go. And we'll grab that again. Yes, that's a bit better. It's the right sort of image, I think. I just want maybe a little more depth of field. So to do that, I'm going to adjust the aperture again. So I'm going to go from f11. I'm going to add 2 stops and go to f22. Now, if I didn't do anything to the flash, that would be 2 stops underexposed. So what I need to do is add 2 stops of energy to the flash. So I can do that quite easily. There we are. So we've added 2 stops of energy. Grab that again and see what it looks like now. There. And I think you can see the difference between those two. That is what we had before. And that is what I've got now. So it's just added that little bit more depth of field. Okay, so to give the image itself a bit more depth, what I need to do now is add a bit more greenery, really. So to start with, what I'm going to do, again in a retort stand or lab stand, I've placed a small twig, and I'm just going to place that fairly close to the lens on the camera, just at the front here. There we go, something like that. Okay, so with that in position, let's just grab that and see what difference it makes. Yes, we've got this at the front here. It's not quite in the right place yet. I think it needs to just come up a little in the frame. But that's quite easy to do since everything is now just in a clamp. So I can just adjust that just very slightly, like so. Let's try that. Yes, that's much better. That's the sort of thing I want. So this is the image without that, and this is with it. Okay, so the next thing, I want to put some more greenery around the back. So the same sort of thing, really. I'm just going to use yet another twig in another clamp and just place this around the back of the main part. Something like that. And now we'll grab that again. Yes, so that's added a bit of out of focus interest in the background. So without all those bits, it's that. And now with all those in position, it's that, which I think looks a bit better. Okay, you don't need any modifier on the flash to do this, because at this sort of distance, this is acting a bit like a very small softbox. It's giving a reasonable quality of light to the subject. And I think the shadows look quite nice. They're not too sharp, they're just a nice compromise. Right, so the next stage would be just to add yet a bit more interest. And I'm going to do that by just spraying the whole thing just with some water out of a small aerosol. So we'll just get in there and just spray that up a little. Just do it a bit at a time. Yeah, that's worked on the leaves. I quite like that effect. So this was with no water. And that's with the water. So let's just add a little more and see if we can get some on the actual berries. There, that's the sort of thing I want. We've got some nice interest coming on here now, which I think is quite good. Excellent. Okay, so with that image now captured, it just remains to go into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-processing. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the file of the image that I captured earlier. So the first thing to do would be just to make a copy of this so I can edit the copy and leave the camera original alone. Now the way that I prefer to do that is just to go onto the background layer here, right click the mouse, ask for a duplicate layer, but ask for a new document. And we'll just call this Slow Berries. And there we are. So now I've got a new document here, so I can close down the camera original. I've always got that to go back to. It's this one that I'll be editing. Alright, so what sort of thing do I want to do to this? Well, I think the first thing that I might like to do is just darken down some of these leaves a bit at the very top and at the bottom here. And there's lots of ways to do that, but one easy way would be just to add an adjustment layer. And just go to adjustment, levels adjustment, and just take the whole thing down a little. There we go. Now that's affected the whole image, and I just want it to affect the top and the bottom. So the bit in the middle here, I want to bring back to its original self. Now I can do that by using the associated mask with that adjustment layer. So wherever I paint in black on this mask will actually bring through the underlying image. So just make sure that black is selected as the foreground color. Pick a paintbrush of a reasonable size and very soft. Okay, and we'll just bring that back, like so. The good thing about doing it this way is that if you do make an error and you bring in something that you don't particularly want, you can always just paint that bit back out again by swapping to white as the foreground color. And then you can take that back down. Okay, so that's what we had before the effect, and that's what I've got with it. So the next thing I'd like to do is just apply a crop. Now I'm going to use this for video, so I'm going to use a specific ratio. So if I use the ratio drop down here, I can just select 16:9, which is the ratio of most videos. Okay, so that has now given me that crop box, and I can adjust this until I'm happy with the image. And there we have it. So by carefully arranging various layers of subject, I've been able to add depth by including the out of focus components, while still keeping the main part of the subject in a sharp focus. And I think overall that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.